Hello and welcome to my introduction to kanji as part of my Japanese for Beginners video series. This is a supplemental video in the series, but you should watch it in sequence if you're following my playlist Japanese for Beginners. If you stumbled upon this video randomly, I also have a hiragana and a katakana video, and check out my playlist Japanese for Beginners to give this a little more context. But anyway, in this video I'm going to explain how kanji work in the context of Japanese, explaining on-yomi and kun-yomi, and also you're going to learn a few of the very basic elementary kanji that you would learn in your first year of elementary school in Japan. So kanji. I think for a beginner of Japanese, kanji make absolutely no sense. I remember when I was first starting to learn Japanese, like, why are you bothering? You already have two different alphabets of your own. Why are you incorporating yet another, like, pictographic alphabet that is really complicated? Why don't you just use hiragana and katakana? So actually, kanji was the start of the Japanese writing system. If you look at a lot of hiragana characters, but mostly you'll see it in katakana, you'll see that they're actually parts of kanji. That's how they got hiragana and katakana writing systems. So a couple good examples of this are katakana ka and katakana ro. Ka and ro, if you've seen my katakana video, or if you just happen to know katakana, you can read those. That's ka, that's ro. But did you know that those are also two kanji? The one that is ka, it looks like a ka, but it's actually a kanji. Fooled you. It is pronounced chikara by itself, and it means strength or power. And then the other one that looks like katakana ro, but it's actually kuchi, or mouth. So the good news is, if you already know katakana, if you already know hiragana, you're already like part of the way towards learning kanji and at least knowing some kanji. The bad news is sometimes you can't actually tell. Just if you were to see those characters isolated, you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell if that was the kanji for mouth or if it was just a katakana ro or ka or chikara. So if you've studied hiragana and katakana, you'll already know that those are syllabic alphabets, which is really cool for spelling and read. Like, there is no such thing really as spelling problems in Japanese. Like in English, you have the O-U-G-H sound that it's pronounced differently in words like enough or through or though. It's like completely different pronunciation each way, and our spelling system is crazy. But hiragana and katakana are great because it's syllabic. If you see the hiragana character for ho, you know that it's always pronounced ho. You know, there's no confusion there. But kanji on the other hand, they are not syllabic. They are pictographic. And there are multiple ways of pronouncing certain kanji. Like I used it to death until it fell apart. I used to have a kanji dictionary. I'm going to link it down below because it's a really good kanji dictionary. I learned so much from it. But anyway, that kanji dictionary, certain characters, like if you look it up, they'll show you like all the different ways of pronouncing the characters. Some of those characters like had like long paragraph of like all the different ways you can pronounce it. Some kanji characters are a lot simpler. They only have like one or two ways of pronouncing it. But basically there are what are called on-yomi and kun-yomi. So the on-yomi is kind of closer to the way it sounds in Chinese. And then that's the reading that you use if you combine two kanji together. So like the kanji compound sensei, that is two kanji. If you've been following my video series, you'll know that sensei means teacher. Even if you haven't been following my video series, you probably know that sensei means teacher. Pretty commonly known word. But that's the on-yomi of both of those kanji, sen and sei. Each of those kanjis, if you like separate them and use them in different ways, they can be pronounced differently. That first kanji is not always pronounced as sen, and that second kanji is not always pronounced as sei. So that's on-yomi. Kun-yomi is when you have like a kanji with hiragana, or sometimes like the kanji by itself. So let's look at sei, that second character in sensei. That means life or to live, basically, in that general sense, and it's a very, very, very common kanji, so learn that kanji. To turn it into a verb, to live, you add kiru to the end of it, and it is not pronounced sei kiru, it's pronounced ikiru. So that would be the kun-yomi of this kanji, because you're combining it with hiragana to make a word. In this case, it's a verb. And that's the kun-yomi, ikiru. But that's not the only kun-yomi that this kanji has. This is one of the more complicated kanji. If you add the kanji mimasu to the end of it, it becomes umimasu, which is the verb, or umu would be the plain version of that. And that means to give birth, to birth. So it's similar to life. You know, you're creating life by giving birth. But it's pronounced differently. It's not always pronounced I. It's not imu or imimas. It's umu or umimas to give birth. And then, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes, you know, the kanji have a pronunciation when it's just by itself. In this case, it's nama. If you just kind of see it isolated by itself, it might be nama, which means raw or fresh. So nama niku would be like raw meat. Nama kurimu, notice it's like kanji with katakana. I kind of like that. There's like no hiragana at all, just kanji and katakana. And nama kurimu, I used that word a lot because it means whipped cream. It literally means fresh cream, but it's what they call whipped cream. Sometimes they clarify with whippushita yatsu, like that thing that is whipped. But yeah, nama kurimu, fresh cream. So you've got se, you've got I, you've got u, and you've got nama. All those different ways of pronouncing that kanji, and there are others. Sorry. So let's go back to the on-yomi for that kanji. Se, sensei, that is like a very common way that it's used, but you can also combine it with gaku, gakusei. And if you've been following my Japanese for Beginners series, you should know that that means student. So gaku, that kanji by itself, it means to learn. But when combined with to live, to learn and to live, that's a student. And that actually kind of makes sense. And that's another really cool thing about kanji is like, they're kind of like the Latin roots of words in English. Once you know what those mean, you can hear a new English word that's long and complicated, but kind of know what it means if you know what the Latin roots mean. And that's kind of how kanji work too. Like you can see a new kanji compound or kanji, yeah, kanji compounds, pretty much like a bunch of kanji smashed together. You don't necessarily know what that word means because it's your first time encountering it, but if you know what all of the kanji in the compound mean, then you can sometimes piece together what that word means. So anyway, gakusei is student. And then speaking of gaku, that kanji, that's a good segue. This is another elementary level kanji. It means to learn. And the kun-yomi of that, so gaku would be the on-yomi, but the kun-yomi, the one that you combine with hiragana, usually to make a verb or an adjective. In this case, you could add more hiragana characters and make it manabu, which is to learn. It's a verb to learn. And then this kanji gaku you'll also see very commonly used as a suffix just in school, like when you're looking at course listings, pretty much everything will have a gaku at the end of it. Here's some examples. There's bungaku, which is like literature studies or literature. Sugaku, which is like the study of numbers or sums, math basically. Shinrikaku, which is psychology or literally mind movement study, if you isolate those three kanji. Bijutsugaku, that is art studies, or literally, if you isolate the three kanji, beauty technique study. So you see it kind of makes sense. And then speaking of bi, this kanji, that's the on-yomi, and it means beautiful. So if you combine it with this second character, which is a very elementary level character, you should know it. That's the character for person. And you might know that person in Japanese is hito, but it's not pronounced bi hito because hito is not the on-yomi of that character. The on-yomi of that character, there's a few, but in this case it's jin. So that this word is bijin, which means a beautiful person or a beauty. And it usually means women, like a beautiful woman, like she's a real beauty. あの子は美人。あの子は美人だぜ。Bishoujo. If you're a fan of Sailor Moon, if you're a fan of Sailor Moon as I am, you know Bishoujo Senshi Seiramun. So if you know shoujo, that means girl. So bishoujo means literally beautiful girl. So bishoujo senshi means beautiful girl soldier. It doesn't mean pretty soldier, it means beautiful girl soldier. But that just sounds clunky in English, so pretty soldier is a really good translation. But then, as you see, if you combine it with some hiragana, this is not bishi, it's utsukushi, which means beautiful. It's an adjective. And then here's a weird one. Here's an example of how this can just forget everything you learned and not everything's consistent. This word right here is oishi. An adjective which means delicious, which you probably know if you've been following this series. But yeah, it literally means like beautiful flavor, which makes sense. Delicious, it's a beautiful flavor. But yeah, oishi, in this case, it's like pronounced o. And then that next character, which is aji or flavor, is pronounced i. It's a weird exception. Here is another simple kanji. It's hikari, which means light. And then if you want to change that into a verb, all you do is you add a ru to the end of it, and it's hikaru, to shine. But when you combine it with other kanji to form a compound, its on-yomi is ko. So you could make a word like senko, which is a flash of light. And this is a good segue into another reason why kanji are super useful and inevitable. You have to learn them if you really want to become intermediate and advanced in Japanese. The reason why is Japanese language is so full of homonyms. They're everywhere. Particularly senko, like just that word alone, I can give you so many different meanings based off of that, based off of the kanji that you use. So you remember flash of light, the first example. Here's another one. It means preceding. This next one here, it means your major or your field of study, like in college. And then here's another one. It takes basically the first kanji from 2 examples ago and the second kanji from 1 example ago and puts those 2 kanji together. This is also senko, and it means first strike, like first at bat. So this, the first kanji in this compound, in this example, it means like the previous, basically. So that makes sense, like the previous or the first. So that's why it can mean like preceding, or it can mean first at bat. Notice that it has that sort of root in common. Here's 2 more kanji compounds that they share the first kanji. Their first kanji is identical. They're both pronounced senko. The first one means selection and the second one means preference. So that first kanji that they share in common, it means to choose or to select. So if you think, you know, preference, that involves choices, it involves choosing and making decisions. So it makes sense that both of those compounds, both of those words would share the same like first kanji. Here's another one that's also senko. There's a lot of words pronounced senko with different kanji. But anyway, this is my last example for this video, and it means a stick of incense. So here's another function that kanji serves in Japanese, and why I think it's inevitable. If you want to get anywhere in Japanese, you really do have to learn kanji. And it's because the Japanese language, when they write things, they don't use spaces, and they use some punctuation, like they use commas and periods and stuff, but they don't use spaces. And even if there are spaces, it still tends to kind of all string together. I don't know, I might just be seeing it this way because I can read kanji. But anyway, look at this sentence. 今日は私は猫の餌を買うためにスーパーへ行ってきました. That means today I went to the supermarket to buy some cat food. But if you look at it all in hiragana, it's just this giant string of characters with a comma. And it's like, you can't really tell where one word begins and another ends. But then I'm going to rewrite that sentence with kanji under it. And it's so much clearer. Like your eyes immediately can separate the kanji from the hiragana. And because the kanji are pictographic, you can read them instantly without having to sound out all the syllables. In theory, you can read them instantly, like assuming you know the kanji, you can read them instantly without having to sound them out. But yeah, it's like your eyes can separate things better, and you can tell where one word ends and another begins, and it's just a lot easier to read. Thanks for watching this video. Thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who make this series and other videos on this channel possible, including my 2 newest patrons, Colton Smith and Julie. Thank you so much for joining. They are at the Genki tier. You can join this tier for just $2 a month to receive weekly study guides about this series, or you can join the Juku tier at $19 a month for worksheets that I grade and send back to you. It's kind of like being part of a class. Mata ne!